Sir, if you could please remain standing and raise your right hand. Do you swear that the testimony you're about to give to this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You can please have a seat, and please state your name and spell your last for the record.
My name is Walter B. Feldhouse, F-E-L-D-H-O-U-S-E.
And how are you currently employed?
I'm a police officer with the City of Manchester, New Hampshire.
And how long have you been employed in a law enforcement capacity with the City of Manchester?
Since 9/12/88.
Were you on duty with Manchester Police earlier this year, specifically January 9, 2012?
I was.
And on that day, do you recall what shift you were working?
I was working the day shift assigned to the patrol division.
Okay. That morning, approximately 10 a.m., do you recall where within the city you were located?
At 10 a.m. I was actually on Nutfield Lane at Amherst Street, just as part of my patrol.
Okay. What was you said Amherst Street, and what was the cross-section, the cross street you mentioned?
It's the alley just east of rather west of the courthouse.
And you're on routine patrol, and you're in the area, and what catches your attention, if anything?
There was a young lady drawing on this side of the courthouse by the entrance.
All right, and at this point, when you first noticed that, where are you physically located? Are you still in your cruiser?
I'm sitting in the cruiser, yeah.
And from when you first make this observation, can you give us a general description of where you're observing, as you put it, the young lady, I think you said drawing on, or writing on the courthouse? Where physically was she doing that?
Well, at first she was on the right side when I first saw her, and then I made the turn. She had moved, or was in the process of moving to the left side, and as I was approaching, she kind of squatted down and was writing in light blue chalk.
You could tell at that time that you at least believed it to be chalk was the writing instrument, so to speak, at the time?
Yes, pretty good size item, and I was fairly close. I was pretty much, I wouldn't say next to her, but I was parallel to her. I was on the street as I was approaching. I passed the courthouse, parked at the crosswalk. That was the first free spot, and I walked back.
Okay, did you ever, I guess, when you walked back, you said you exited your cruiser at some point. Can you describe for us why it is, how do you come to the conclusion that you're going to park and exit your vehicle?
She's drawing on the side of the courthouse.
Okay. You exit your vehicle, and where do you head?
Back toward the stairway.
And what happens at that point? What are you observing at that point?
She's just finishing up her writing and stands up, and I walk up the stairs and ask her what she thought she was doing or what she was writing on the courthouse.
Do you recall any specifics of what was being drawn or written, what the markings were?
My recollection was free Ademo.
Okay. Do you recall how many total folks in the immediate area were actively engaging in the use of chalk that you described?
No one, except her.
Okay. Do you physically approach and go closer to the young lady?
They do. They're right in front of one another.
Do you see the individual who you personally observed using chalk on the courthouse building? Do you see that person in the courtroom today?
I do. Her hair's a little different, makeup's a little different, but it's the young lady here, Lynn, whose last name I'm having a difficult time pronouncing.
Seated to my left here at the defense table?
Yes.
Did you have any discussion with Ms. Sieradowski?
Yes, I asked her why she was writing on the walls.
And you recall what
house? Yes, she said they're putting my friends in cages.
Was there anyone else on scene in the area who you were able to determine was a witness or a potential witness to the actual application of the chalk to the courthouse building?
There were a couple of court officers that were right there.
And did any of those court officers draw your attention to the scene in any way when you initially observed the
Well, initially they apparently saw me pulling down the alley and pulling on Amherst Street because they kind of waved me toward them as I was actually making my observations.
Okay. What did you do at that point?
After asking her what she was doing, and she told me they put my friends in cages after that.
Correct. What happened after that?
I told her she was under arrest and placed her in handcuffs.
Ultimately, was she transported? I guess Manchester utilizes a transport wagon. Is that accurate?
Correct.
And ultimately was transported to the Manchester Police Station.
Yes, sir.
Were you on scene able to take any evidence, seize any physical evidence on scene?
There were, well, she had a box of chalk with her, and then there was another light box of chalk down by the smoking area in the ashtray.
And what did you do with those items?
I picked them up and brought them back to the police station.
As for the actual, you said you personally observed this individual using chalk on the courthouse building itself. Did you take any steps to memorialize or to photograph the actual writing that you had observed on the building?
I did. I called for Officer Kelly McKinney to come down and photograph that for me, and she did.
Were you, how long after the point of how long after the point of transport back to the station did you remain on scene, if at all?
For a few minutes, just there was an initial concern as to how we were going to get it cleaned up. That decision actually left my hands, so I left.
Do you know who, or do you have any information as to who made the decision in terms of cleanup of the chalk that you had observed?
Well, my understanding that day was initially we were going to have the city do it, and then the building services for the court wasn't sure that that was going to be appropriate, so they checked with their powers to be, and then the decision came back that the city would in fact clean it. I guess the graffiti squad, as they're known, was going to come down and do it, but their machine was broken.
Okay.
And the fire department eventually responded in.
Were you yourself personally on scene when the Manchester Fire Department arrived, or you left by that point? Or do you recall?
No, I was not there when they did the cleaning.
I'm sorry, I think you said it, but I failed to take note. Who was the officer that you called to come to take photographs of the scene?
Officer Kelly McKinney.
Just 1 second, Your Honor, please. Yes. Just 1 moment. Thank you, officer. There's no further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Ma'am, if you have any questions, would you please stand and ask them from behind the microphones there?
Yes. So, Officer Feldhouse, so when you first saw the individual that you believed to be me, talking on the building,
You? Yes.
yes, that wasn't me
That was you.
talking on the building. You believed that it was chalk that I had in my hand. You said you just
Well, I
stated.
know it was chalk when I eventually got to you. I guess maybe I just assumed that it was chalk from a distance because it was chalk all over the place on the ground, but none on the walls.
The defense would like to place a motion to dismiss based on McKinney versus Nielsen, 9th Circuit Court, California, that says no reasonable person could think that writing with chalk would damage a sidewalk.
Councilman.
I understand the defendant's argument. I think it's an argument based on what the legal definition of the legal requirement of damage is as it relates to a currently pending charge of just 2 charges. One of them has the element of damage. I think that it's the state's position that it is damage. The state would respectfully suggest that I believe the defendant cited to a California case you may have just mentioned, which would certainly be, if the case is what she purports it to be, would be persuasive authority out of a separate jurisdiction. The state's position would respectfully be that there's authority, direct authority, that it does constitute damage in this particular jurisdiction where we are, and the state would welcome the opportunity to, if the court were so inclined or would find it helpful, to respond if the court wanted memos of law or response within 10 days after today's hearing, if I understand the argument correctly, as to whether or not chalk that the Officer Feldhaus has testified about, whether or not that's legally sufficient in terms of meeting the element of damage as required by the statute. The state would, if it would be helpful to the court, would welcome the opportunity to have an opportunity to submit a memo with respect to damage.
Proper time for motions to dismiss is at the close of the evidence, and to the extent it raises a legal issue, I will give the parties 10 days. I'll listen to legal argument now, but it's premature until all of the evidence is submitted.
Okay. Okay. Mr. Feldhaus?
Yes, ma'am.
So are you saying that I did damage to a piece of property?
Objection, Your Honor. Same basis as for whether or not there's damage to a piece of property as required by statute, is asking this witness to make a legal conclusion that would be within the province of the judicial branch to make a call as to whether or not there's legally sufficient testimony to support a finding of damage to property.
May I speak?
Yes, ma'am. I'm asking you to speak.
I'm simply trying to form my basis for my defense, obviously.
The issue, ma'am, is not the nature of your defense, but whether or not the question is proper.
Okay.
The issue of asking an individual to opine on the legal element itself is objectionable, because in the context of this, as it constitutes invasion into the ultimate decision-making process of the court, the precise question you've asked, therefore, on that basis, is one that the court must sustain.
Okay. Is the chalk still in the building?
I didn't see any there today. I saw some on the sidewalk.
But there's no traces of the chalk from the other day, or not the other day, several months ago on January 9th. There's no traces of that chalk still in the building.
Nothing readily apparent. I didn't inspect it closely, though. I'm sorry.
Well, would you say that the building is most likely in the exact same state of being as it was before I ever came to the Manchester District Court building on January 9th?
I suppose it could be.
Okay. Tell me, Mr. Feldman. Feldhaus, I'm sorry. According to our interaction, well, first, actually, I'll bring up the one question. I recall offering to clean up the damage. Do you recall that?
I don't specifically recall if you did. There was people that gathered that idea came up amongst them.
Well, I have video that proves that I was the one that brought that up, and that I was one that brought that up before anyone else ever came out. I said that I was happy to clean up the chalk and restore the building to its original state of being, and that I could do this. Basically, it would have cost me $5, and I would have cleaned up the chalk, and we could have both gone about our day. You wouldn't have had to throw me in a cage. You wouldn't have had to call up the fire department. Sorry, don't.
So the objection would be, Your Honor, that it appears either one, it's a compound question that's forthcoming, or two, the defendant is attempting to testify, which would be fine. It's just that this is the appropriate time for that. I didn't hear a direct question that the officer was in a position that he could answer. It appeared to be somewhat commentary on the officer's evidence. So the objection is that I didn't hear a question forthcoming.
Ma'am,
Okay.
this is some time to ask questions. You'll have an opportunity to testify if you wish.
Okay, no problem. Thank you for your patience as well. So tell me, Mr. Feldhaus, do you believe that I had a reasonable basis to believe that I had a right to do what I was doing, based on our conversation?
I believe that you believed it.
Again, Your Honor, that is again, part of the statutory elements, and that is, again, asking Officer Feldhaus, as a police officer who is a responder and a witness to the incident, to be in a position to draw a legal conclusion as to the legal element of whether or not the individual has a basis or the proper authority to engage in the act that she did.
I disagree with that because the statute states, 634-2, criminal mischief. A person is guilty of criminal mischief who, having no right to do so, nor any reasonable basis for belief of having such a right, purposely or recklessly damages property of another. So basically what I'm saying is that if I had no right to do so, nor any reasonable basis for belief that I had a right to do so, this is evidence that should have been gathered when I was arrested. This is evidence that's necessary to prove this case. Am I?
Ma'am, the precise question you've asked is afoul of the same issue asking this witness or any witness about the ultimate element. So by asking the individual about the element, it is improper because that is an issue for ultimate determination by the court.
Okay.
So for that reason, following the same legal reasoning in sustaining the objection with regard to the damage, I'm going to sustain the objection with regard to this question.
Okay. So, officer, did you ask me? You stated that you asked me why I was writing on the walls, and that I said because my friends were being put into cages or were being sentenced to time in a cage in this building. Correct?
Generally, yes, it's accurate.
So you did. I mean, do you think, I suppose this might be some sort of speculation, do you think that's a reasonable basis for belief that what I was doing was right?
I just would renew the objection with respect to the question of whether or not the officer can opine on whether there's a reasonable person would believe that it's a legal conclusion under the statute.
No, everything's okay. I just wanted to say something to her.
So he can't determine whether I believe something was right. Okay. I can go different with this.
All right, the issue, ma'am, is the same issue. Facts are supposed to be adduced. You're asking individuals to provide legal conclusion.
Okay.
The purpose of testimony is for the purpose of adducing facts, but ultimately, after your argument and the prosecution argument, for the court to make a legal determination.
Okay.
And it is improper in the manner in which you pose the question, because it's not adducing a fact from which you can argue what the law is.
Okay.
So I have to sustain the objection.
Okay. Mr. Feldhaus, are you aware at that time that I'm an activist?
That you're aware?
That I'm an activist?
I suppose, well, I guess I didn't know you were, but after you wrote on the wall, I did.
So you were aware at that time that I'm an activist?
Well, I guess generally people that write things on the walls want to be heard, and I don't know if they're activists or graffiti artists.
Okay. Were you aware that I'm a Christian?
Objection, basically relevant here.
Ma'am, I guess I have a hard time understanding the relevance of that, but you have a right to be heard.
I'm trying to form a basis. Form a defense.
You have, ma'am, I don't understand how one's religious belief influences a defense as to the elements of the offense.
That's the elements of the offense.
Or the defense, and I don't understand how your religious belief advances the notion of a defense.
Well, I suppose when it's my turn to speak, I can,
All right, so I sustain the objection at this point based upon it can't be linked up in any 401 sense as to.
okay. I have no further questions for this witness.
Is there redirect examination of this witness?
No, Your Honor.
You may step down, sir.
Thank you, Your Honor.
If I may step just outside here and I get the state's next witness. Thank you. Thank you for that delay, Your Honor. The state calls Officer Kelly McKinney. Good afternoon. If you could please remain standing and raise your right hand, do you swear that the testimony you're about to give to this court will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
You can please have a seat for us. And once seated, you can please state your name and spell your last for the record.
Kelly McKinney, McKenney.
How are you currently employed?
By the Manchester Police Department
And how long have you been serving as a law enforcement officer?
for 7 years.
All that time with the city of Manchester?
Yes,
Were you on duty the morning time, January 9 of this year?
yes,
Approximately 10 a.m. thereabouts, shortly thereafter, did you have occasion to be dispatched to the courthouse area?
yes, I was.
And specifically, which courthouse are we talking about in the city?
The District Court at 35 Cameron Street.
And what was the nature of your reason for responding?
To take photographs of graffiti on the building.
Did you go to or come to the courthouse?
Yes.
And upon arrival, what is it that you were able to visually observe at first when you first arrived?
There were several people standing around with cameras and other recording devices. And then I saw the graffiti on the walls of the retaining wall, the handicap ramp, and the outside wall of the courthouse.
And at that point, was it apparent to you whether or not a formal arrest had already been made at the time of your arrival?
Yes.
And do you recall who in your department, was there any officer on the scene who had made the arrest?
Yeah, I believe Officer Feldhouse was still here.
Did you take the photographs of the chalk on the building as you described?
Yes.
And do you recall approximately how many total photographs you took?
I don't recall how many.
If I could show you a few photographs, Officer McKinney, if I could just, I'll show them to the defendant here first. May I approach the witness, Your Honor? Thank you. Officer McKinney, I've just provided you 3 pages of paper and what appears to be 10 photographs. Are you able to identify what those depict?
Yes, the graffiti on the courthouse wall and the retaining wall for the wheelchair ramp.
And is that depicted in each of the 10 photographs?
Yes,
And who took those photographs?
I did.
And do those 10 photographs that you're looking at now fair and accurately depict the conditions then and there existing at the time that you took the photographs of the courthouse area?
Yes.
At this time, Your Honor, the state would seek to introduce the photographs, all 10 photographs, I suppose, for convenience and ease of marking. We ask that all of them be admitted as one exhibit, state exhibit number 1.
Is there an objection under the rules of evidence, ma'am?
No.
Then they will be marked without objection as states 1.
Thank you. Thank you, Officer McKinney. No further questions at this time, Your Honor.
Ma'am, if you have any questions to ask of this individual, would you please stand and ask them now?
Ms. McKinney, when you arrived here at the Manchester District Court building today, was the chalk still on the wall?
Today?
Yes.
No, ma'am.
Was there any trace of the chalk shown in those pictures on the
No,
wall? No further questions.
Is there redirect examination of this witness?
No, Your Honor.
You may step down. Counsel?
Again, Your Honor, just step outside to obtain the next witness. Thank you, sir.